Hello? There I am. Hey, here I am. Hi guys, here I am. Okay, so, yes, we're starting off a new series called The Lost 40. And tonight we're going to do things just a little differently. What I want to do is I want you guys to start in team time, but hold on before you run. I'm going to tell you what I want you to do, okay? I've given each team a different Bible story, and what I want you guys to do, it's like just a mini, like 10 minutes at the most Bible story. You're going to be talking about the concept of hiding. So you're going to be reading a different Bible passage in each of your groups, and you're going to be focusing on the question of, what's going on in this story and what are the people or the person in the story hiding from. That's how we're going to set the tone for tonight. And then I need one person from each group, one smart, charismatic individual, to come up here and just do a short presentation so you can tell everyone in the group what happened in your story and what it was about and who those people were hiding from, okay? So pick the best looking, most charismatic person in your group to come up here and present that and do it in 10 minutes. So go now, go. Do we know what our story is? All right, so I need someone from Incendia to come up first and tell me about the story that you guys read. You guys were talking about Adam and Eve, so I need Julia to come up. She's first. All right, tell us.
Hi.
What was going on?
So there's this guy and his wife in a garden, and the part that we read started with Eve deciding that the tree looked good to eat, so she ate it and gave some to Adam, and they got in trouble. So they hear God walking in the garden, and they go hide. And God ends up finding them, and yeah, because he's God. And he asks them like why they did this, and then they start the whole blame game thing. So yeah.
All right. So Adam and Eve hiding, mostly out of shame, right? They're hiding for shame. All right, Peregrinus. You guys had the story of Jonah. Who's going to come up and tell me what happened there in that story? It is Matt, all right. You're for our friend Matt. Here he comes. All right, Matt. Get on up here. Such a great public speaker. A good choice on Peregrinus' part. You like this one?
Talking on.
What's happening in the story? In the story of Jonah, surprisingly, Jonah is on the run from God because he does not want to preach to the people of Nineveh, which we equated to the south side of Chicago. So he runs away on a ship, and there's a storm, and he gets shipwrecked and swallowed by a big fish. What are most people in the story trying to hide from? Well, Jonah was trying to hide from God, and that didn't get him in the best situation.
Thank you, Matt. All right, let's hear it for Matt. Okay, now, Ferocia, you guys have Gideon. Who's coming up from Ferocia to talk about Gideon? All right, Alec Lancaster, here you go.
Hi, guys. Okay, so what's happening in the story? Basically, if you guys have ever read Judges, it's pretty much Israelites screw up, God sends somebody to capture them and punish them, then he makes somebody really strong and they go and kill all the people that, conquer them. So Gideon is this person in the story. But what happens is the Mennonites come and they overtake Israel because they were being bad, and everyone was hiding in caves and things like that because they didn't want to be killed by the Mennonites. And then
Maybe not the Mennonites.
what was it? Midianites. Sorry, Midianites. Whatever. Maybe it is. Whatever. So and then basically he comes to Gideon and he's like, "Hey, you're gonna free these people." And then Gideon was kind of scared about it and things like that. And then people are hiding in the story from the Mennonites. Was that better? Yeah. And then so they were hiding from them, and also Gideon in a way was kind of hiding from God because he was scared because he was from the least clan. He was the least person in his clan as well. So.
Yeah, absolutely. He starts making all kinds of excuses. Pick somebody else. All right, Frendo, you've got the story of Moses. Who's going to come up from Frendo and tell me what happened? Oh, there's a shocker. It's going to be Stephen. He hates public speaking, so don't make him feel embarrassed or anything.
I was told I'm charismatic.
You're told wrong.
So we got Moses. when he was a young adult, and he went out to see his people. We're not sure if he knew that he was a Hebrew at the time, or he knew that he was a Hebrew, but he went out to go see them, and then he found this Egyptian just kind of wailing on a Hebrew guy. So he kind of looked around, and then he killed the guy. Casually looked around and then killed him. And then he heard some Hebrews talking about it, and he's like, "Oh crap! I think Pharaoh knows about this." And he did, and Pharaoh was like, "I'm gonna kill you." And so Moses fled and hid from death and such from Pharaoh.
That's about the size of it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's it, right?
Good job, CJ.
Very, very well done, people. So we have 4 stories, and we have 4 different scenarios, people hiding from different things. Adam and Eve are hiding because they're ashamed of something they did. Jonah is hiding because God has given him something he feels is too difficult to do, and he doesn't want to do it. Gideon is hiding because he's just basically afraid. I mean, he's just afraid of everything that's going on, so he just literally hides in the cave, hoping it's all going to go away. And Moses hides from the consequences of his actions. So that sets the stage here, because tonight we're starting this concept of the lost 40, the 40 days that Jesus comes back after his resurrection. And my job tonight was to talk about hiding, which seems like an interesting place to start, but that's exactly what was going on in the beginning here. It's human nature, I think, to try and hide from things in life that we find unpleasant or things that we find difficult. I know that that's usually my first reaction in a lot of situations. I kind of am like, maybe if I hide, if I try to wait it out, things will get better on their own. You know, my problem might just go away, or perhaps God will just find somebody else. And I think that's what all these people in these stories were thinking, maybe. So if I hide from it or deny it or run from it, I think a lot of us, that's where we go originally when things get tough. And that's exactly what the disciples did, really. I mean, if you think about it, as soon as Jesus is crucified, it says right there in Mark 14:50, everybody deserted him and fled. And that's exactly what happened. That's exactly what happened. They come, they arrest Jesus, and everybody scatters. That garden scene was like, mass exodus, right? They come and they grab Jesus and everybody takes off. Peter at least follows him. Peter follows him into the courtyard of the high priest, not really in a real bold way, but kind of in a, kind of sneaking in because he wants to find out what's going on. But even Peter ends up failing Jesus when he's confronted. And we're going to look at the first slide here. Because it happens not once, and wow, that print is really small, so let me read off this piece of paper right here. It says, as Peter was below in the courtyard, one of the servant girls of the high priest came, and seeing Peter warming himself, she looked at him and said, "You also were with Jesus of Nazareth." But he denied it, saying, "I neither know nor understand what you're talking about." Okay, so that's the first time, right? That's the first time. Then it happens again. And he went out to the porch, and the rooster crowed. The servant girl saw him, and again, once more, said to the bystanders, "This is one of them." But again, he denies it. And then a third time. After a little while, the bystanders were again saying to Peter, "Surely you're one of them, for you are a Galilean too." But he began to curse and to swear. He's getting, really defensive at this point, right? "I don't know the man you're talking about." Immediately the rooster crows a second time, and Peter remembered how Jesus had made the remark to him, "Before the rooster crows twice, you will deny me 3 times." And he began to weep. And this comes from Mark 14:66 or 72. So Jesus tells Peter during that Last Supper, look, before the rooster even crows 3 times, you're going to deny you even know me. And if we look back at it, Peter's reaction, Peter's answer when Jesus says this to him, though for those of you who know the story, he says, "Even if I have to die with you, I will never disown you." That's what Peter says. And then when push comes to shove, and this happens, what happens to that grandiose promise, right? It sounded good at the time, right? And I'm sure, I have no doubt that when they were having that meal, when Peter said this, he meant it. I have no doubt that Peter was sincere in saying that he would die before he disowned Jesus. But when the rubber hits the road, that's not at all how it went. And haven't we all made promises like that? You know, haven't we all been there where we swear, you know, we're going to be there for that person, you know, we're going to follow through on that promise, you know, there's no way anyone's going to shake our faith, and then when push comes to shove, it doesn't go that way. It's hard to see out there. All right, so you guys are kind of in little small groups. What I want you to do now is we're just going to do like a table discussion, talk to the few people on the couch that you're sitting at or at the table you're sitting at, and I want you to think about this situation with Peter and answer these two questions when we're talking about this denial. First, Peter says, no way, I'm never going to disown you. And then less than 24 hours later, that's exactly what he does. I want you guys to talk about these two questions. What do you think broke Peter? What caused him to deny Jesus? And if you could put in a good word for Peter, what would it be? How would you defend him? What would you say? I want you guys to discuss it at your table, on your couch, whatever it is, for like 2 minutes. Just go around and discuss this just a little bit. Let's bring it back in.
That's true.
And I'm curious. Somebody let me know in your groups, what did you, first off, let's talk about the first question. What do you think broke him? What made him, you know, what do you think? Who came up with the answer to that? I can't see, so if you're raising your hand, don't. Just like say it. What broke him? Scared to die? Okay, what else? Heat of the moment, right? Yeah, lots of times that happens. You know, you don't really have time to think, you just react. Peer pressure, okay? Yeah, I mean, let's be honest. All of the other disciples left. Peter's the only one that's even around, right? Okay, did you guys see something over there? They stole. All right, well then I'll give you this. If you could put in a good word for Peter, you guys over here, what would it be? Well, how are you going to defend him? Yeah. What do you got? Go ahead. Kayla, you raise your hand. Yeah. Okay, yeah, that's a good one. You know, sometimes it's more than just self-preservation. It's I made a decision because what good would it do for me to die as well? Sort of when Chris and I were whitewater rafting over the summer, I don't know if any of you heard this story. Clearly the rafting guide said to lean right, and someone whose name is not Jen, but whose name is Chris and has long gray hair and is sitting over there, clearly when he said lean left, Chris leaned right and fell out of the boat. And for one brief second, I stood up and I went, and then I went, no, forget it. so I get where you're going with that. Self-preservation. Why should I fall out of the boat too? That makes no sense. He can swim. He had a life jacket and a helmet. He'll be fine. Right? That's where I'm going. Not all the same, totally off track, but I get it. All right. What else? What else you got, Matt?
You had something else about it.
What?
At least it wasn't 4 times.
At least it wasn't 4 times. All right, okay. The 4th time, he would have finally been down with it. He'd have been like, all right, yeah. No, but there's a lot of reasons you could stick up for Peter. And I think when we look at our own lives, we want to look at ourselves and say, we've all been there, right? I mean, it may not be as big as denying Jesus because, let's be honest, we're not going to be thrown in a cell. We're not going to be beaten. We're not going to be crucified upside down for believing in Jesus today. But we do it in little ways, right? Changing who we are, depending on who we're with. You know, compromising because it's too difficult to do the right thing. You know what I'm saying? So I think we do it all the time. We change who we are. We we compromise our principles sometimes. I think we've all been there. I know I have. You know, I change my convictions a little bit. Depending on who I'm with, oh gosh, I better censor myself around this particular group of people because I know they're not Christians and they're not quite down with that, so I better tone down the faith talk, you know, stuff like that. So I think in smaller ways, and sometimes in big ways, we all do the Peter thing, you know, in our own way. But let's move on to the rest of the disciples and get back to what's going on there. So it's shortly after the crucifixion. Peter has denied Jesus. Jesus has been crucified. Jesus is now buried. And we got to look at where the disciples are at. You know, they spent more than 3 years following Jesus, right? They're told that he's the Messiah, you know, that he's going to release them from captivity. You know, he's supposed to bring down this kingdom of heaven, and now he's dead. You know, now he's gone. So I put myself in there. I try to put myself in their shoes. You know, what would I do? You know, what would you do? Right? Imagine it. You've placed all your hope in Jesus, you know, everything. You've given it all up. You know, you've told everybody else to place all their hope in Jesus. And now he's dead. You know, not only is he dead, he's humiliated. He's discredited. You know, he's crucified. How are you feeling right now? You know, scared, hopeless, lost, you know. So they run and they hide because, you know, quite frankly, I don't think they knew what else to do. I mean, what else could they have done? And, you know, when I first look at these scripture verses, it doesn't make much sense to me because on the surface I'm thinking, you know, it's not like Jesus didn't warn these 12 men. Didn't tell them what was going to happen, right? You know, it's not like he didn't warn them from the get-go that things weren't going to be easy. We see it all over Scripture. Jesus told them over and over again that life was going to be tough. He says right here on the next slide, it's Matthew 10, 16 through 19. Again, it's going to be ridiculously small and you're not going to be able to read it. I'm sending you out like sheep among wolves. Therefore be as shrewd as snakes and as innocent as doves. Be on your guard. You'll be handed over to the local councils to be flogged in synagogues. Yeah, that sounds like fun. Great. On my account, you'll be brought before governors and kings as witnesses to them. When they arrest you, don't worry about what to say or how to say it. So he tells them, look, people are going to beat you. They're going to throw you in jail. You know, they're going to persecute you. This stuff's going to happen. And he warns them pretty clearly about what they can expect. And when he tells them it, you know, they're down with it. They go. They're like, I'm with you. I'll do it. And we see plenty of examples while Jesus is alive, before he's crucified, of the disciples doing this. You know, so we know that these were men who were totally on board with this, right? So, you know, what's changed now? You know, why is it that all of a sudden they're hiding in this upper room? I think what's changed is Jesus is gone. You know, he's not there anymore. There's no physical presence anymore. I'm going to give you another minute. We don't even need to turn the lights on for this one. And maybe we don't even have to have a discussion this time. I want you to think for a second, each of you, get someone in your mind right now. Someone in your life who's really important to you, who's a huge source of support for you. That person who you go to when you need advice, when you need guidance, when you're scared, when you're confused. I want you to think of that person who instinctively is the first person you call, the first person you text, you know, the first person you run to when you're in crisis, okay? Think of that person right now. You know, that person is someone who's pretty important to you. How would you feel if that person wasn't a physical presence in your life anymore? You know, you can't talk to them anymore. You can't see them face to face. You can't sit down and have that conversation. They're not going to take you out for coffee or meet you for lunch and talk to you about the conflict that's going on in your life. They're not there anymore. And that's where the disciples are at this moment. Before, Jesus tells them this stuff, and they can have this conversation. He can reassure them. They can see him face to face, and now they don't have that. And so, you know, physical presence is pretty important in your life, you know? And when that person isn't there anymore, when you can't see them, when you can't be with them, and you can't talk to them, it's a lot more difficult. So the disciples don't have this anymore. What do? Next slide is John 20:19. This is right after the resurrection. It says, on the evening of the first day of the week, when the disciples were together with the doors locked for fear of the Jewish leaders, Jesus came and stood among them. So where does Jesus find these 12 men that he's been prepping to change the world for the last 3 years? Hiding in an upper room with the doors locked. And he's probably like, oh gosh, that's why I came back. I knew you guys were going to do this. I knew it. You know, I picture him doing that, you know, because I know all the time we picture Jesus every time he says something and the disciples don't get it. He goes, you know, head slap. And so I'm sure that's the first, before he said anything, he probably went, I knew you guys were going to be here. I knew right where to find you. What are they afraid of? You know, what do you think they're afraid of? Well, let's look at it. You know, Jesus has been arrested, tried and convicted as a revolutionary, right? Someone who wanted to overthrow the government and overthrow religious leadership. Okay? That's what he's been branded as. They just killed him in the most horrific way humanly imaginable. I mean, you know, crucifixion was an example to everybody who was ever thinking about doing anything like what that person up there just did as to what was going to happen to them if they did the same thing, right? And so now you are one of his inner circle. So doesn't it stand to reason that you are probably next? Right? So that's why they're hiding. They're hiding in this upper room because they're terrified. And I'm imagining, hoping, maybe, perhaps, I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt. Okay, let's regroup here, guys. Now what the heck are we going to do? How does Jesus respond to them when he finds them? I love this. The next slide comes from John 20:21, and this verse here gives me a whole lot of reassurance when I'm struggling with stuff. He walks in and he says, "Peace be with you." And after he says this, he shows him his hands and his side. Now, peace be with you was a real common greeting back then. You know, people use it all the time. You walk around and say, "Hey, what's up? How's it going?" People said peace be with you to each other all the time. But this is different. This time, this greeting means so much more. You know, Jesus completely changes what this means. Jesus' greeting here is a response to their current emotional situation. He knows where they're at. He knows what's going on, right? So in the midst of their anger and in the midst of their fear and uncertainty, Jesus' first words are a response to that situation. Peace. Peace be with you. That's what he says. First and foremost, to calm their fears, to calm their heart and be like, "Hey guys, look, it's going to be all right." You know, that's what he starts with. And he does this for a couple of reasons. On some level, I've got to believe it was most likely a response because of what happened. If I'm one of the disciples and I see someone I love and care about, crucified the way Jesus was, my first reaction might be to respond in anger and in more violence, right? So this is a reminder not to strike out in fear or in frustration or in hatred. Jesus doesn't want these men to respond with hostility or desire for vengeance. So he says, peace. That's got to be first and foremost what we need to remember here. And secondly, peace is his wish for them emotionally. They need to experience God's peace in the midst of their fears and know that he's in control, right? Now more than ever, they have to trust Jesus. And his next words in this next slide illustrate that even further. He says, in the beginning he says, "Peace be with you," but then he says it again. Again, Jesus says, "Peace be with you. As the Father has sent me, I'm sending you." And with that he breathed on them and said, "Receive the Holy Spirit. If you forgive anyone their sins are forgiven. If you don't forgive them, they're not forgiven." So he's describing, in these passages here, the reality of the current situation in these few short and simple lines. In the aftermath of his death, the disciples have two choices, really. They can either forgive those who have attacked Jesus and killed him. They can either forgive those people who are going to continue to persecute them, or they can hold on to those sins. They can hold on to their anger, and they can hold on to their fear. And what's going to happen if they hold on to that is that's going to paralyze them. So this is a pivotal moment for these men in this room. They've got a big choice to make. How are they going to respond? And Jesus tells them they've got to bring peace. They've got to be able to forgive. They've got to be able to let it go. It's because sending the disciples here is a reflection of the beauty of why God sent Jesus in the first place. That's what I love right here. It's a mission of love. It's a mission of reconciliation. So just like God sent Jesus, so Jesus now sends his disciples, and they're charged with extending that same mission of peace and God's love throughout the world. It's this reciprocal thing, and it's just this beautiful idea, right? Don't go in hatred. Don't go in violence. Go in peace. That happened. Let it go. Our God is a forgiving God, and so are we, right? So that's why Jesus tells them this, right? This idea of peace. And this gift of the Holy Spirit, that's the empowerment. It's the way that they're going to get the strength they need to do this. The Spirit's the authority, and it gives them this new sense of purpose. That's how this is going to happen. That's how they're going to do this. So now we move on to Thomas, right? Because remember, he wasn't there when this whole thing first happened. For those of you who aren't familiar with the story, Jesus comes and he talks to the disciples. Thomas, I don't know where he was, but he was not here the first time. So a week later, Jesus comes back, and Thomas is the guy that I think a lot of us can probably identify with. He's not really ready to accept the fantastic stories he's heard without seeing the actual evidence for himself, right? He wasn't there, he missed it. So everyone's telling him this, but he hasn't seen it for himself. And a lot of times I feel like Thomas gets the bad rap. We call him Doubting Thomas. I feel like we just should call him latecomer. Latecomer to the party. Poor Thomas. He was late, right? Who can blame him? So the clear intent in this particular part of the story is we're invited in. So we can identify with Thomas. We didn't see it either the first time, right? Thomas, when he first hears the story of Jesus coming back, he's just like us. He didn't see it. So the other disciples are telling him about it, but he didn't witness it. So Jesus sees Thomas, and he says to him, put your finger here. See my hands. Reach out. Put your hand in my side. Stop doubting and believe. And I don't think that Jesus addressed Thomas with condemnation or with judgment. I don't think that this was like a scolding. I don't think Jesus was angry. Just like Thomas, we're unsure and we didn't believe and we're filled with doubt and fear. And Jesus responds to us in the same way with this reassurance that he gave Thomas. He's like, look at my hands, look at my side. Stop doubting, believe. I told you, told you this was going to happen. Here I am. So everyone who identifies with Thomas at any point in their life, and believe me, I've been there, any of us who have got this doubt that creeps in, receives this reassurance. Read this story, look at it. That's the way Jesus responds to us. And I think it's why Jesus spent 40 days here on earth after his resurrection. Have you ever felt like a failure? Made it impossible for you to serve? Have you ever felt like you're not good enough? Have you ever been in the disciples' shoes? Running, hiding, afraid? The disciples, they forgot Jesus' promise to return from the grave. They forgot. And they sit hiding and hopeless in this upper room until Jesus comes back and reminds them. So Jesus' time on earth, I think, in these 40 days was really meant to do three things. And I think there's a slide on that, right? The first thing he wants to do is convince his disciples that he's really alive. This wasn't just a fairy tale. It wasn't just some cool made-up story. This is something that really happened. So he comes back so they can see it, and they can witness it, and be convinced that this is true. And the second one is comfort. Comforting them as to his resurrection and their own future. They needed this reassurance. They needed to see Jesus, and Jesus knew that, he's got to tell them, I'm not physically going to be here anymore, but you can trust what I said. Remember what I told you. So he comes back to comfort them. And then finally, he comes back to commission them. He commissions his disciples to go out and preach the gospel to the world. Because let's be honest, if they don't do that, then what's the point? It's pointless, the whole thing. What good is it if no one else knows about it? So if these disciples don't go out and preach this gospel of this death and resurrection, what's the point? So Jesus has got to commission them. What change is going to happen in the world if you just sit in this room and don't tell anybody? So in the end, that's why he comes back. And I think that's the challenge for us when we look at this story, these first pivotal moments when Jesus talks to these disciples. It gives us a lesson too. What good is it? What good is it if you don't share what you know? Compromising when it's inconvenient, hiding when it gets uncomfortable. What good is that? So in the next couple of weeks, we're going to really dig into this stuff. Next week, Gwen is going to talk about the visit. And it's really cool because she's going to talk about what actually happened in these 40 days when Jesus was with these disciples and these people. All the people that saw him, what was he doing? And we'll be digging into Scripture and really looking at what that's about. And I'm really excited to hear more about that. And then in the final week, we're going to be talking about the series topic that week is called Go. And that's when we really look at, now what are we supposed to do with this knowledge? What does Jesus want from us now? So I'm excited because this is the first time we've really spent a lot of time here unpacking these lost 40 days. So for me, it was just, kind of the tip of the iceberg. My job was just to kind of scratch the surface so that Gwen and either Ben or Jason can dig into this in the next couple of weeks. So I'm excited to see, where we're going to go with this, to see just how far the rabbit hole goes. I don't know, are you going to take the blue pill or are you going to take the red pill? I don't know. Let's see. So anyways, I'm going to invite the band back up to pray, and I'm going to pray, and we're going to be done. So, yeah, that's it. All right, so, Jesus, we are so amazingly grateful and awestruck by, this whole Easter thing, that we talked about last week, this whole crucifixion and rising from the dead, and man, it's awesome, and it's beyond our comprehension. And more importantly, we're looking forward to learning more about what you did when you came back and why you came back. And just like those disciples who you commissioned, we hope to take that challenge ourselves and really go out and tell other people what we know and be the change that you want us to be. And tell that story and stop hiding and stop denying when we're afraid and draw on that courage that you reassured your disciples with, because we know that it's there for us as well. And we ask all of this in your name. Amen.